Years ago, Evelyn was left heartbroken when Ryan, the man she loved, abandoned her for a life of wealth and prestige. Alone and carrying a secret, she rebuilt her life from the ground up. But when fate brings Ryan back into her world, he discovers a truth that changes everything. A daughter he never knew he had. As the two confront the ghosts of their past, they must navigate a path of forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. Will love be enough to heal old wounds, or is the damage too deep to repair? This emotional journey will captivate your heart and keep you on the edge of your seat until the final, life-changing revelation. From the moment she was born, Evelyn Ward carried a spark within her that seemed far too bright for the humble world she grew up in. Her home, nestled in the outskirts of a small, forgotten town, was modest, its walls worn by time and hardship. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the paint peeled from the walls. But there was a warmth inside that not even the coldest winter nights could steal. Her parents, both hardworking and filled with love, always found ways to fill the home with laughter and a sense of togetherness despite their struggles. Her father, Thomas, worked long hours in construction, his hands rough from years of labor, but his heart was soft when it came to his family. Each night, after a long day of grueling work, he'd sit at the dinner table with a smile, telling Evelyn about the importance of building something that would outlast your time on Earth. "It's not about how much you have, Evie," he would say, his voice steady but filled with pride. "It's about what you leave behind. Make your mark on this world, something that will stand tall, even when you're gone." Her mother, Rose, a seamstress with hands as gentle as her words, would spend long evenings mending clothes and creating beauty from worn-out fabric. She was a woman of quiet strength, always teaching Evelyn to appreciate the small details in life. "The magic is in the details," Rose would say as she worked, her fingers deftly stitching pieces together. "It's the little things that show who we truly are." These lessons etched themselves deep into Evelyn's heart, fueling the fire of her dreams. She often wandered away from the quiet neighborhood to gaze at the towering buildings of the city center. They seemed like giants, untouchable, magnificent. She dreamed of one day becoming an architect, designing spaces that could inspire people, regardless of their backgrounds, places where anyone could feel they belonged. But Evelyn knew the road ahead would be difficult. College was a luxury her family couldn't afford, and every cent they had went to keeping food on the table. Determined not to let go of her ambitions, Evelyn took a job as an administrative assistant at a local construction firm. It wasn't the future she had imagined, but it was a step in the right direction, a foothold in the industry that had always fascinated her. She promised herself that one day she'd be the one designing those towering buildings, not just organizing the paperwork for them. Her first day at the firm felt like the beginning of something monumental. As she filed away documents and took phone calls, her eyes always wandered to the blueprints and architectural designs that littered the desks of engineers and architects. She would trace her fingers over the lines on the pages, imagining how she would change them, how she would make them her own. It was during one of those early days that she met Ryan Lancaster, a name that carried weight in the construction world. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without saying much, his presence alone enough to fill a room. Tall, impeccably dressed, and always composed, he seemed to embody everything that Evelyn admired about the world of design and construction. Their first encounter was unremarkable on the surface. Ryan had dropped a stack of papers as he hurried out of a meeting, and Evelyn, ever helpful, bent down to assist. As their hands brushed against the scattered documents, their eyes met briefly, and something flickered between them, something unspoken and fragile. It was a moment that neither of them fully understood, but that neither could forget. Ryan was the epitome of success. He had worked his way up from nothing, just like Evelyn dreamed of doing, but his success had come with sacrifices. He was consumed by the pressures of his status, the expectations of his wealthy family, and the constant need to maintain appearances. At first, his interactions with Evelyn were strictly professional, but as weeks turned into months, something shifted between them. They started having lunch together, their conversations drifting from business to personal dreams and aspirations. Evelyn opened up about her love for architecture, and Ryan listened with genuine interest, often offering words of encouragement that made her heart swell with hope. He was different when they were alone, warm, attentive, and seemingly captivated by her passion. But as much as Evelyn wanted to believe there was something real between them, a small, nagging voice inside her wouldn't let her forget the stark differences that separated their worlds. Ryan came from a world of wealth and privilege, a world where appearances mattered, and Evelyn, with her humble background and her unconventional beauty, didn't quite fit in. She was all curves and soft edges, while the women in Ryan's circle were polished and poised, always immaculate in their designer clothes and slender frames. In private, Ryan treated her like she was the most important person in the world, but in public, he kept her at arm's length. It was as if he was ashamed to be seen with her, and that reality gnawed at her, even as her heart longed to believe that he saw her for who she really was. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, Evelyn stood by the window of her small apartment, staring out at the city skyline. She wondered if she'd ever be able to break free from the constraints of her circumstances. She had the drive and the ambition, but the weight of her reality was hard to ignore. As much as she wanted to believe that Ryan could be part of her future, there was always a part of her that doubted whether he could ever truly accept her for who she was. As the wind howled outside, Evelyn closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. She had come too far to let self-doubt take over now. No matter what, she would find her way. She would build her life, brick by brick, and prove that she was more than where she came from. That night, Evelyn made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let Ryan or anyone else determine her worth. She would forge her own path, even if it meant doing it alone. What she didn't know was that her life was about to take a turn she could never have anticipated, a twist of fate that would challenge everything she believed about love, success, and the true meaning of happiness. As the months passed, Evelyn and Ryan's relationship deepened, though it remained a secret. They spent more time together, sharing meals, dreams, and pieces of themselves that no one else knew. With him, Evelyn felt seen, in a way she hadn't experienced before. Ryan seemed captivated by her intelligence, her determination, and her ability to see beauty in things others overlooked. When they were alone, it felt like the world disappeared, but the cracks in their relationship were hard to ignore. Ryan had never introduced Evelyn to his friends or family. Whenever they went out, it was always to some quiet, out-of-the-way restaurant or hidden cafe, places where they wouldn't be seen by anyone who might know him. Evelyn's suspicions grew, but every time she brought it up, Ryan brushed her concerns aside with soft reassurances. "You know how it is," he'd say. "My world is complicated. I just want to keep this between us for now. It's better that way." For a while, Evelyn believed him. She convinced herself that Ryan's caution was temporary, that once things settled in his professional life, he would introduce her to the rest of his world. But doubt lingered, like a shadow at the edge of her happiness. Then came the gala. It was a charity event hosted by Ryan's construction firm, and every major player in the industry would be there. Evelyn knew how much the event meant to Ryan, so when he asked her to attend as part of the staff rather than as his date, she tried not to let her disappointment show. "It's just not the right time yet," he explained, offering her a weak smile. "But I want you there, close to me." So Evelyn went, wearing the best dress she could afford, though it was far more modest than what the other women wore. As she moved through the opulent ballroom, bustling with elegant gowns and sharp suits, she felt out of place in a world that wasn't her own. The wealthy mingled effortlessly, exchanging laughter and knowing glances, while Evelyn did her best to stay invisible, quietly observing the world that Ryan belonged to. From across the room, she spotted him, Ryan, standing among a group of influential executives, looking every bit the powerful, confident man she had fallen for. But something inside her sank as she watched. He was laughing, his arm around the waist of a woman whose beauty was impossible to ignore. Her name was Vanessa, a strikingly gorgeous socialite who was well known in their circles. Tall, blonde, and always impeccably dressed, she looked like someone who had stepped straight out of a fashion magazine. Evelyn felt her heart twist painfully as she saw the way Ryan's hand lingered on Vanessa's back, the way they exchanged subtle glances that spoke of an intimacy Evelyn had never seen between them. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just for show, maybe Ryan had to keep up appearances. But deep down, she knew that what she was seeing was more than just a facade. It was the truth she had been too afraid to confront. As the night wore on, Evelyn found herself retreating to a quiet corner of the ballroom, her hands shaking as she clutched her glass. Every part of her wanted to leave, to escape from the painful reality that was unraveling in front of her. But she stayed, hoping, praying, that Ryan would seek her out, that he would offer some explanation that would make everything right again. Hours passed, and he never came. By the end of the night, Evelyn was ready to leave when Ryan finally approached her, his expression strained. He led her to a quiet hallway away from the crowds, and for the first time, she saw the conflict in his eyes. "Evelyn, listen to me," he began, his voice low. "Vanessa, she's just someone I have to keep close for business reasons. My family, the firm, they have expectations, you know? But what we have, it's different. It's real." Evelyn stared at him, the hurt in her chest too heavy to bear. "Is that what I am to you? Something hidden away while you parade around with someone like her? Do you even see me, Ryan?" For the first time, Ryan couldn't meet her gaze. The silence that followed was louder than anything he could have said. "I can't do this anymore," Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. "I've tried to ignore it, to pretend like it doesn't matter. But it does. I matter." Ryan reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her tears spilling over despite her efforts to hold them back. "I deserve better than this, Ryan. I deserve to be with someone who's proud of me, not ashamed." And with that, Evelyn turned and walked away, leaving behind the man who had once been her dream. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of Evelyn's life. She had lost not just Ryan, but the fragile hope she had held onto for so long. The future she had envisioned, one where they built a life together, where she was more than just a secret, was gone. Every day she went to work, keeping her head down and avoiding any mention. The firm was large enough that their paths rarely crossed, but the knowledge that he was nearby, living his life as if nothing had changed, gnawed at her. It was during this time that Evelyn threw herself into her work, staying late into the evenings, poring over blueprints and construction plans. If she couldn't control the mess that was her personal life, at least she could control her dreams. She worked tirelessly, learning everything she could about the business, making connections, and slowly but surely building a reputation of her own. But fate, it seemed, had another surprise in store for her. One morning, as Evelyn prepared to head to work, she noticed something different. She had been feeling off for weeks, nausea, fatigue, mood swings, but had chalked it up to the stress of her breakup. But now, standing in her small bathroom, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her hand, the reality hit her like a wave. She was pregnant, and Ryan was the father. Evelyn's mind raced as she tried to process the news. She was alone, heartbroken, and now facing the unimaginable responsibility of bringing a child into the world. How could she tell Ryan? Could she even trust him to care? The man who couldn't even acknowledge her in public, how would he handle this? The days that followed were a blur of confusion and fear. Evelyn wrestled with the decision of whether or not to tell Ryan. She wanted to protect herself, and more importantly, protect her child from the heartache she knew Ryan was capable of causing. But part of her also knew that he had the right to know. In the end, Evelyn chose to keep her pregnancy a secret. She moved to a quieter part of the city, resigned from the firm, and began to focus on preparing for the life that was growing inside her. As her belly grew, so did her resolve. She would raise this baby on her own if she had to. She would give her child the love, security, and protection that she had once sought for herself. Months passed, and Evelyn welcomed her baby into the world. A little girl with bright eyes and a smile that reminded her of everything she had once hoped for. Her daughter became the light in her life, the reason she pushed forward, even on the hardest days. Evelyn rebuilt her life, slowly but surely. She found work at a small architectural firm, where her talent and passion were recognized. Though it wasn't easy, she managed to create a stable, loving home for her daughter. They were happy together, just the two of them, and Evelyn had made peace with the idea that she would never see Ryan again. Until one fateful day, years later, when their paths crossed once more. Years had passed since Evelyn had last seen Ryan Lancaster, and her life had taken on a rhythm of its own. Her daughter, Emma, was now a bright, joyful 5-year-old, with her mother's fierce spirit and a smile that could light up any room. Evelyn had found a balance between her career and motherhood, working as an architect in a small but thriving firm. Though the journey had been difficult, she had managed to create a life filled with love, purpose, and pride, one that no longer hinged on Ryan or the heartbreak he had caused. Evelyn had convinced herself that her chapter with Ryan was firmly closed. She had never told Emma about him, choosing to raise her in an environment free from the complications of a man who had never truly loved them both. But life has a way of throwing the unexpected into the calmest of waters. One ordinary afternoon, Evelyn found herself attending a networking event for local architects and developers. It was a chance to meet new contacts, discuss potential projects, and solidify her presence in the field. She had no reason to suspect that this particular day would be any different from the dozens of other events she had attended in the past. But as she mingled with the crowd, discussing blueprints and construction strategies, she caught sight of someone across the room who made her heart stop. There, standing tall in the center of a group of well-dressed executives, was Ryan. Time had changed him. His once youthful face was now etched with lines of experience, his eyes a little darker, more intense. But it was unmistakably him. Evelyn felt a rush of emotions she hadn't expected. Anger, sadness, confusion, and somewhere deep inside her, a spark of the feelings she had once tried so hard to bury. Before she could slip away unnoticed, Ryan's eyes found hers. For a moment, he seemed just as shocked as she was, frozen in place as the world moved around them. Then, with a determination that Evelyn hadn't seen in years, he excused himself from the group and made his way toward her. "Evelyn," he breathed, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and something else. Regret? Relief? She couldn't tell. "Ryan," she replied, her tone cool but steady, though inside her heart raced. She hadn't prepared herself for this moment. This reunion she had convinced herself would never happen. She had imagined countless scenarios in her head of what she would say if they ever crossed paths again. But now, standing in front of him, her mind went blank. "I can't believe it's you," Ryan said, his eyes scanning her face as if trying to read her thoughts. "It's been years. You look different." Evelyn forced a small smile, though the tension between them was palpable. "It has been years," she replied. "People change." Ryan nodded, a flicker of something unreadable passing over his features. "I've thought about you a lot," he admitted, his voice lower now. "About what happened, about how I handled things. I've wanted to reach out, but I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had waited years for an apology, for some acknowledgement of the pain he had caused her. But now that the moment was here, it felt hollow. Too much had happened, and too much time had passed. "Well, you made your choice, Ryan," she said, her voice firmer now. "You chose your world over me, and I had to live with that." Ryan's face fell. "I know I hurt you. I was a coward, Evelyn. I let fear of what people would think, fear of disappointing my family, control me. But I've changed. My life, it didn't turn out the way I thought it would. I lost a lot." Evelyn looked away, trying to gather her thoughts. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to let him know how much he had broken her heart, how she had picked up the pieces of her life without him. But another part of her wanted to protect herself, to shield the world she had built from the man who had once shattered it. "I'm sorry things didn't work out for you, Ryan," she said, her voice soft but distant. "But I moved on. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I'm not looking back." Ryan looked down, his jaw clenched. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I regret everything. I was wrong, Evelyn. I see that now." Before Evelyn could respond, a small voice interrupted them. "Mommy, who's that?" Evelyn turned to see Emma standing beside her, holding a small bag of cookies from the event's refreshments table, her bright eyes curiously looking up at Ryan. In that instant, Evelyn felt the world shift. This was the moment she had dreaded, the moment she had never fully prepared for. Ryan's eyes widened as he looked at Emma, the realization hitting him like a tidal wave. His face drained of color as he struggled to process what he was seeing. "Is she—" His voice was barely a whisper, filled with shock. Evelyn took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no going back now. She had kept this secret for years, but now the truth was standing right in front of him, undeniable and impossible to hide. "Yes," she said quietly, kneeling down to Emma's level. "Emma, this is Ryan. He's someone I used to know." Emma smiled up at him, completely unaware of the gravity of the situation. "Hi," she said brightly, her innocence cutting through the tension in the air. Ryan stared at Emma, his eyes filling with a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. "She's mine," he said, more to himself than to Evelyn. "She's my daughter." Evelyn stood up, her hands trembling as she tried to keep her voice steady. "Yes, Ryan, she's your daughter." For a long moment they stood there in silence, the weight of the truth settling between them. Ryan's eyes moved from Evelyn to Emma and back again, his face a storm of emotions, grief, guilt, and something Evelyn hadn't expected to see. Love. Pure, raw, unmistakable love for the child he had never known existed. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ryan asked, his voice breaking. Evelyn met his gaze, her own heart aching with the memories of all the times she had thought about telling him, but had chosen not to. "Because I didn't know if I could trust you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You made it clear that I didn't fit into your life, Ryan. How was I supposed to believe that Emma would?" Ryan swallowed hard, his eyes glistening with tears he fought to keep at bay. "I was wrong, Evelyn. I was so wrong. I didn't know what I was losing until it was too late." For the first time in years, Evelyn saw the vulnerability in Ryan, the cracks in the perfect facade he had always shown the world. But it didn't change the past. It didn't change the fact that he had left her when she needed him most. Evelyn's voice softened as she looked at him, feeling a mixture of sympathy and resolve. "I didn't want to risk Emma growing up with someone who didn't want her, Ryan. I wasn't going to let her feel like she wasn't good enough for your world." Ryan nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the little girl who was now happily munching on her cookies, blissfully unaware of the emotional storm brewing between the adults. "I understand," he whispered, "but I want to be part of her life. If you'll let me, I want to know her. I want to make things right." Evelyn's heart ached with the weight of the decision she had to make. Part of her wanted to shield Emma from the heartbreak she had experienced, to protect her daughter from the pain that Ryan had caused. But another part of her knew that Emma deserved the chance to know her father, to decide for herself what kind of relationship they would have. "You have to earn that," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm not going to just let you walk in and out of her life. If you really want to be part of this, you need to prove that you're in it for the long haul." Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I will. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise you, Evelyn, I won't let her down." As they stood there, with the weight of their past finally exposed, Evelyn knew that the future was uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, she felt the possibility of hope. Ryan's reappearance in her life had stirred up old wounds, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something better than what they had before. The days after Ryan's reappearance were a whirlwind for Evelyn. She had been prepared to live the rest of her life without him, content in the world she had created for herself and Emma. But now, everything had changed. Ryan was back, and he wanted to be a part of their lives. And while Evelyn's trust in him had been shattered long ago, she couldn't deny the look in his eyes when he saw Emma, the same look of love and wonder that she had felt the moment her daughter was born. For Emma, it was all a grand adventure. She had no idea about the complexities of her parents' past or the heartache her mother had endured. To her, Ryan was just a new friend, someone who showed up with wide eyes and a warm smile, eager to learn about her life. In the beginning, Evelyn had been wary, keeping their meetings brief and supervised. But as time went on, she began to see a change in Ryan, something genuine that she hadn't expected. He showed up day after day, week after week. He asked about Emma's favorite games, her favorite stories. He listened when she talked about her dreams of being a doctor or a teacher, and even though he had missed the first 5 years of her life, he made every effort to catch up. Ryan wasn't the distant, polished man Evelyn had once known. This version of him seemed softer, more grounded, and though she tried to keep her heart guarded, Evelyn couldn't help but feel something stir inside her as she watched him interact with their daughter. One afternoon, A few months after their unexpected reunion, Ryan invited Evelyn and Emma to visit a park just outside the city. It was a sunny day, the kind of perfect autumn afternoon where the leaves crunched underfoot and the air was crisp with the promise of change. Emma was delighted, running ahead to the playground while Evelyn and Ryan sat on a nearby bench watching her play. For a few moments, there was only the sound of Emma's laughter and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Then, Ryan broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about the past," he began, his voice quiet, "about the choices I made and how they affected you. I never told you how much I regretted walking away." Evelyn glanced at him, unsure of what to say. She had heard apologies before, and while they had healed some of the surface wounds, the deeper scars remained. "I was scared," Ryan continued, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I was scared of what my family would think, scared of how my life would change if I chose you over everything else. But none of that matters anymore. I lost so much because of my fear. I lost you. I lost the chance to know Emma from the beginning, and I can never get that time back." His words hung in the air, raw and filled with regret. Evelyn's heart clenched as she listened. Part of her wanted to forgive him, to believe that people could change, that maybe this time things would be different. But another part of her still remembered the pain he had caused, the nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering why she hadn't been enough for him to stay. "You did lose a lot," Evelyn said softly. "But so did I. I had to raise Emma on my own, with no help, no support. I had to figure out how to build a life for her while trying to mend the pieces of my heart that you broke." Ryan nodded, his jaw tight as he absorbed her words. "I know. And I know I can't make up for the past. But I want to be here now, for both of you. I want to earn back your trust, Evelyn. I don't expect it to happen overnight, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, her mind racing. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that he had truly changed. But trust was fragile, and it had taken her years to rebuild her life after what had happened. Could she risk it all again? "I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, Ryan," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But Emma deserves to have her father in her life, and if you're serious about being there for her, then I won't stand in the way." A look of relief washed over Ryan's face, though he didn't smile. He knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I promise you, I'm not going anywhere this time." As they sat in silence watching Emma play, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a mixture of hope and fear. She had been down this road before, and it had nearly destroyed her. But Emma was her world now, and if there was a chance that Ryan could be a positive presence in her life, then she had to give him that chance. For Emma's sake. Over the following months, Ryan became a consistent figure in their lives. He attended school events, joined in on weekend outings, and even helped Emma with her homework. Evelyn watched from the sidelines, still cautious, but slowly beginning to see that maybe, just maybe, Ryan's change was real. He seemed more present, more aware of the responsibilities that came with being a father. There were moments late at night after Emma had gone to bed, when Ryan and Evelyn would talk about the past. Sometimes the conversations were painful, filled with the ghosts of what could have been. But other times they found themselves laughing about the absurdities of their situation, about how life had taken them on two very different paths, only to bring them back to this strange, unexpected place. One night, after a particularly long conversation, Ryan looked at Evelyn with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "I still love you," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never stopped." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected those words, hadn't even allowed herself to imagine them. For years, she had convinced herself that her love for Ryan was something that had been left behind, something that couldn't be rekindled. But now, hearing him say it, she felt her resolve begin to waver. "I don't know if I can go down that road again, Ryan," she said softly. "I've spent so long trying to move on, trying to protect myself. I can't let myself get hurt like that again." Ryan reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking for one, not just for Emma's sake, but for us. I've changed, Evelyn. I'm not the same man who walked away from you all those years ago." Evelyn looked down at their intertwined hands, her heart torn between the past and the present. She had built a life without Ryan, a life she was proud of. But as much as she had tried to bury her feelings, there was still something there, something undeniable. "I need time," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I need time to figure this out." Ryan nodded, his expression understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait as long as it takes." In the weeks that followed, Evelyn wrestled with her emotions. On the one hand, she had seen the changes in Ryan, had witnessed his dedication to being a father, and his genuine effort to repair the damage he had done. On the other hand, the scars of the past were still there, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to risk her heart again. But one evening, as she watched Emma and Ryan play together in the park, laughing and chasing each other through the grass, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. She saw the man Ryan had become, the father who had worked so hard to make up for lost time. And in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was room in her heart to forgive. As the sun set behind them, casting a warm golden light over the park, Evelyn made a decision. She walked over to where Ryan was sitting on the bench, watching Emma with a contented smile on his face. "Ryan," she said, her voice steady but soft. He looked up at her, his expression filled with hope and uncertainty. "I think I'm ready to try again," she said, her heart racing as the words left her lips. "But this time it has to be different. No more secrets. No more running away." Ryan stood up, his eyes shining with emotion. "I promise, Evelyn. No more running. I'm all in." And for the first time in years, Evelyn allowed herself to believe him. She allowed herself to imagine a future where they could build something real, something lasting. Not just for themselves, but for Emma, the daughter who had brought them back together. The weeks that followed Evelyn's decision were filled with cautious optimism. Ryan had kept his promise. He didn't run, he didn't hide, and he didn't shy away from the hard conversations they still needed to have. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Evelyn allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future with him. Not the illusion she had once clung to, but something real and solid, built on the truth of who they both were now. For Emma, life became a beautiful mix of laughter and new memories. Having both her parents present filled her world with a joy she didn't yet fully understand, but one she embraced with the innocence of a child. She loved their weekends together, the little traditions they were already forming. Ice cream on Saturday afternoons, bedtime stories read by both her mom and her dad, and the playful moments where Ryan lifted her high into the air, making her giggle uncontrollably. But as happy as those moments were, Evelyn knew there was still work to be done. Her heart had been fractured too deeply to simply forget the past. Forgiving Ryan wasn't a one-time decision. It was a journey, a process of slowly letting go of the pain he had caused her, while also trusting that this new version of him was here to stay. One afternoon, after picking Emma up from school, Evelyn and Ryan sat down at the kitchen table to talk, something they had been doing more often lately. The air between them had shifted. It was no longer tense, no longer filled with unresolved questions. There was an openness, a willingness to face whatever came next, but also a quiet uncertainty about what the future held. "I've been thinking about us," Ryan said softly, glancing at Evelyn with those familiar eyes that had once made her heart race. "I know things are better now, but I also know it's going to take time for you to really trust me again. I'm prepared for that." Evelyn nodded, grateful that he understood the complexity of her feelings. "I want to believe that we can make this work," she replied. "But I need to know that this isn't just about fixing the past. I need to know that you see a future with us." Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady. "I do, Evelyn. I see a future with you, with Emma. I want to build something lasting, something we can all be proud of." For a moment, Evelyn let his words sink in, feeling the weight of them in her chest. She had spent so long guarding her heart, protecting herself from the possibility of getting hurt again. But now, with Ryan sitting there, his eyes filled with sincerity, she realized that maybe it was time to stop protecting herself so fiercely. Maybe it was time to take a chance. "We've been through a lot," Evelyn said quietly, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I'm not the same person I was when we first met, and neither are you. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we're stronger now, because of everything we've been through." Ryan smiled, his gaze softening as he squeezed her hand gently. "I think you're right, and I want to prove to you every day that I'm here for the long haul. Not just for Emma, but for you. I love you, Evelyn. I've never stopped loving you." Hearing those words again felt different this time. They weren't just a promise of something far off and uncertain. They were a declaration of the man Ryan had become, a man who was willing to fight for their future. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of hope, of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could have the life she had always dreamed of. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice trembling as the words left her lips. "But this time, we do it right. Together." Ryan stood up and pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the weight of their past fell away, replaced by the warmth of the present and the promise of what lay ahead. In that moment, Evelyn knew that they were no longer defined by the mistakes they had made or the pain they had caused each other. They were defined by the love they still shared and the future they were ready to build, one that would be strong, honest, and filled with the kind of happiness they had both longed for. As the months passed, Evelyn and Ryan continued to rebuild their relationship, brick by brick, laying a foundation that was stronger and more resilient than before. They moved slowly, respecting the process of healing while also embracing the joy of being together again. For Emma, the changes in their lives felt like a dream come true. She now had both of her parents, present and loving, and the sense of security and happiness that came with it. One warm summer evening, as the sun began to set and the sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, Ryan took Evelyn and Emma to a special spot he had discovered during one of his projects. It was a quiet clearing overlooking the city, a place where the world seemed to pause, where everything felt still and perfect. They sat together on a blanket, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the air filled with the soft chirping of crickets. Emma was nestled between them, her head resting on Evelyn's lap, her eyes slowly drifting shut as the day came to an end. "I've been thinking about something," Ryan said softly, his voice low so as not to wake Emma. "About the future. About us." Evelyn turned to him, her heart racing slightly as she saw the serious expression on his face. "What is it?" she asked. Ryan took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the skyline in the distance. "I know we've been taking things slow, and I'm glad we have. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. With both of you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, his hands slightly trembling as he opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Evelyn, I love you. I've loved you from the moment we met, and even though I made mistakes, even though I hurt you, I want to spend every day making it up to you. Will you marry me?" Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the ring, her mind spinning with the weight of the moment. She had never expected this, never imagined that after everything they had been through, they would find their way back to each other in this way. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, a smile breaking through the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice shaking with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ryan's face lit up with a smile of pure happiness as he slipped the ring onto her finger, pulling her into a tight embrace. They sat there, holding each other, as the stars began to twinkle above them, the future stretching out before them like a beautiful, endless horizon. For Evelyn, the journey had been long and filled with pain, but it had also been filled with love, growth, and the discovery of what truly mattered. She had found her strength, her purpose, and the love she had always deserved. And now, with Ryan and Emma by her side, she was ready to step into the future, knowing that together they could build a life filled with love, laughter, and the promise of forever. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. We hope it touched your heart and made you feel the emotions as deeply as we did while creating it. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below and let us know how this journey impacted you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel driven by stories. For more inspiring and emotional stories, make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale that will move your heart. Thank you for being a part of our storytelling community.